up, all my fight fans? So, word around the campfire is Nick Diaz did a little interview. I guess he was doing a watch party for the UFC. What was it, 282 this past Saturday, and someone did a interview with him. I can't exactly remember or recall who it was, but he asked them that he is ready to return. He wants to return 2023. That he is prime. He is going to be the best Nick Diaz that we have already seen. I mean, this is all quote unquote. I don't know exactly 100% what exactly he said, but basically that he is ready, that he is going to be in good shape, that he is not going to be like it was before. And what I mean by before is we remember what happened. I believe it was not last year, but the year before, in September of 2021, he fought Robbie Lawler, part two. And good God, did Nick Diaz did not look like Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz looked old. He looked out of shape. He looked like he did not want to be there. The guy was like fighting like he was in the Matrix. And I am a Nick Diaz fan. I'm a Diaz fan all the way. Nick and Nate, these guys are MMA to me. You know, these guys are the reason why, in many ways, I watched MMA. You know, some of their fights I've always watched, you know, from Nick Diaz, you know, when he fought Paul Daly in Strikeforce. So when he fought KJ Noons, and then when he dismantled BJ Penn, and then even those rivalries that he had with George St. Pierre, and then of course Anderson Silva, even that great fight he had with Carlos Condit. I've been a fan of Nick Diaz for a very, very long time. Even when he fought in Pride against Gami, or Gami, I think his last name was. I can't remember exactly his first name, but I do remember when he fought him in Pride. That was one hell of a fight as well. Nick Diaz has been around the block for quite some time, and he was always a very, very fun fighter to watch. So, with that being said, I am very excited for him to return. I really do, because yeah, guys, he did not look that great against Robbie Lawler. When it came to Robbie Lawler, I mean, we remember what happened in that first fight when Nick Diaz was in the UFC before he left the UFC. You know, a lot of people always forget that he was actually in the UFC first. Well, not first, but he was in the UFC before. So he fought Robbie Lawler. He fought Diego Sanchez. I believe he fought Jeremy Jackson, if I remember correctly, somewhere in that name. So yeah, he's fought a few known people in the UFC in his early days. But that Robbie Lawler fight was an epic. You know, Robbie Lawler was a young guy. He was coming. He was on the grind. He was doing his thing, and then all of a sudden, Nick Diaz comes around and catches him with that little hook that barely looked like it almost barely touched him. It barely connected with the chin and dropped Robbie, and that was done. The fight was over with, and it was a big, big, I guess, upset at the time. And then here he comes, part two. I can't exactly recall when that fight was, that first fight. It had to be in the early 2000s, because this was like the early stages of the UFC at that time. And this fight had to be in at least 15 maybe 20 years in the making, I want to say. Maybe even more, somewhere around that time frame. Not really 20 years, maybe not more. I say about a little bit, anywhere between 10 and 15 years rematch in the making. That would be my good time frame. And yeah, he looked very sluggish. He looked very just looked like he literally got off the couch and took this fight. And it was very unfortunate. It was very unfortunate because we were all pumped up. When I heard this fight was happening, I was excited. I was like, oh my God, he's finally back, because Nick Diaz had not fought since 2015 of January against Anderson Silva. And it was a good fight. Of course, Anderson Silva got the nod, but still, that's a long layoff. We're talking almost 7 years layoff. You know, it was already 6 3/4, I guess you could say, at that time. So yeah, with Nick Diaz coming back, he is a little older. He obviously is the older brother of Nate Diaz. And it's unfortunate because we always talk about his career too, and those long layoffs that he had really hurt him. They really, really did. And we also remember about that time. Remember when he got tested positive for the Anderson Silva fight, and he was tested positive for steroids. Not steroids, excuse me. No, 100% not steroids. He was tested positive for weed. He was tested positive for weed, and it was very, 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 I guess you could say, almost like a black eye to the sport, or to like everything regarding when it came to marijuana and MMA, because them two are really, really totally different. You know, I've done my fair share of weed, and I know other people have, other people in mixed martial arts have, and they can tell you firsthand that it's really not a performance enhancer. And this guy, who has never tested positive for steroids, outside of other guys that we know that tested positive for steroids, and they wanted to ban him for 5 years. 5 years. And that's like, whoa, what do you mean? This is marijuana is nowhere near. You're basically at that moment, you're literally saying that steroids is nowhere near as dangerous as marijuana to the commission that wanted to suspend Nick Diaz for 5 years for testing for marijuana. And I get it; it's been more than a few offenses. He had been suspended for a few offenses for marijuana, but we all, I guess, marijuana has come such a long way, and it has a better understanding. Even when I was growing up, there was always you guys remember the commercials about your brain on drugs and this is that, and people really didn't understand marijuana at that time. So it is a little bit understanding, but at the same token, come on, 5 years. Marijuana, exactly. We know steroids and we know marijuana. Totally, totally different. Can't even compare, not even close. Zero comparisons. Zero, absolutely zero. The only performance that helps you is performance enhancing for you would literally be helping you sleep and helping you feel better. That is it. That literally is it. You ain't gonna do nothing. It's probably gonna make you even that much more slower if you go into the octagon. I'm sure there's at that time there's different. Obviously, we know there's different types that can help you out in different ways now. But back then, no, not even close. So with that being said, it would definitely be nice to see Nick Diaz back. I'm very happy to see him back. I know there's a lot of people out there that are not too happy with it because we only remember what he looked like in that last fight. I just don't feel like that was Nick Diaz. I feel like, there was a lot of talk of him not even really wanting to do that fight at that time. So, what do we do with that? He doesn't really want to fight, he pretty much looked like it. He pretty much didn't look like he trained because if you guys remember, that fight with Robbie Lawler was scheduled for 170 pounds, but Nick Diaz couldn't even make weight. So he said, hey, let's do it at 185. That's not Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz is a professional. He's a constant professional. He always makes weights. The guy does triathlons. He does marathons. I've even heard that he's even swam to Alcatraz. I think twice. Got to look into that because I'm pretty sure I remember that. That is a beast. That is a cardio machine. This is the guy that never really got tired. And when you look at that fight, he gave up. He's like, oh, I'm done. And that's not Nick Diaz. So I'm really hoping that with him being serious about him returning, that, Nick Diaz is serious about training. He is serious about coming back. He is serious about, taking his career serious. So that I would be extremely happy to see that. And I can't wait to see that. So let me know in the comments, guys, on what do you think? How excited are you for Nick Diaz to return? Or you think Nick Diaz should probably stay retired? How do you feel about Nick Diaz? How serious do you think he is about actually training? Or do you think this is all just hearsay and he's really not saying, or he's really not doing what he is actually saying he's going to be doing? Let me know in the comments, guys. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.